Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
The Daily Compliance News for the last day of July in 2021, July 31, the Black Widow edition. We begin with that story that Scarlett Johansson, the Black Widow, has sued Disney for alleged breach of contract for lowering her box office revenue by engaging in or allowing Black Widow to be released simultaneously on the big screen and on-demand streaming on the Disney Channel. Disney's response was classic corporation. They accused her of being greedy because so many people were suffering during the pandemic. Well, guess what, guys? That's not a legal defense. A contract's a contract. If you wanted to renegotiate the contract, you could have done that. But of course you didn't. You breached the contract or allegedly breached the contract without notice. Without discussions and without revision to the contract. So it's not clear what the impact this will have on the MCU franchise. Is Disney now going to get its panties in a twist and fire Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow? Will she continue to work with Disney? At this point, unclear, but a pretty big lawsuit for those in the Hollywood scene. On a much more somber and serious note, in construction sites for a Amazon warehouse in Windsor, Connecticut. That's Connecticut and not the South. Let me emphasize that. There have been several nooses appear on the construction site. Obviously, that's a reference to the KKK and lynching of blacks in the South in the 20th, 18th, and 19th and 20th century. So the question is, what is Amazon going to do about this? Are they taking steps to prevent this? And whether or not this will, how Amazon is taking this or handling this at this point. So they said they're committed to holding the perpetrators accountable, but activists believe this really isn't enough. So you can't put a noose somewhere without making clear what you mean by that. I don't care where you are. I don't care who you are. And if that comes up in your work site, it has to be dealt with. It has to be immediately, and the responsibility of the company has to be to make sure it doesn't happen again. Next up, Eli Lilly has a new compliance officer. And our good friend Dylan Tokar over at the Wall Street Journal Risk and Compliance Journal interviews him. His name is Alonzo Weems. And it's a great interview, and he sets forth, I think, a lot of the thoughts and priorities of compliance going into 2025 and really beyond, that technological innovation is going to be driving compliance, and it really needs to be seen as a business process. So check out the interview by Dylan Tokar. And then finally, Donald Trump's attempts to hide his tax returns took a big hit when the Department of Justice said that Congress can get those. So whether Trump obeys the law, of course he never did before, so I don't know why he'd start now, but at least the DOJ is on record now. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.